Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Hockey Picks and Bets show. I am Matt Moody, joined by DJ Mitchell here for the inaugural episode on the Mayo Media Network. DJ, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're recording this on Sunday. I'm a huge Cleveland Browns fan, so by the time you listen to this, I'll either be crying or very happy. This is extremely exciting. We are so honored to have joined this network. Pat Mayo, one of the best in the industry. It feels great. We've been doing this daily fantasy stuff for about 4 years now, and finally joining a network feels just fantastic. So I'm so super excited to get going. There'll be a lot on this podcast as far as bets and all the gambling you could want, a lot of hockey news. We've been covering the sport, playing the sport forever. So I hope you guys enjoy. Definitely check out the Mayo Media Network on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. It takes 5 seconds. It means the world to us. And I know, the more we do and the more other guys are going to get involved with this, it's going to be a growing, ever-changing thing. So Matt, anything you want to start off with? First off, how are you?
Yeah, this is great. We're doing, I think this is going to be the start of something pretty special here. We're launching a daily show. DJ and I will be doing the Tuesdays and Thursdays if all goes according to plan. But really what we're just here for is to talk about fantasy hockey. We're here to talk about betting on hockey, and we're here to talk about, a daily fantasy too. There's just so many ways that kind of tackle this sport that seem really, underserved just by extent of football and basketball get all the attention, but us little hockey players, we don't get too much. So we're here to give you that. What this show is going to be a full season sort of preview. We'll go division by division. Today will be the East and the West divisions, and the Central and Canadian will be at a later point, likely tomorrow when you're listening to this. But just stay tuned to the audio, the podcast feed, to the YouTube feed, and you'll see you'll just see these pop up again every single day. So we are really looking forward to this. Obviously, we couldn't do this without the help of some friends. So if you are looking for help with your bets or your fantasy play, checking out Fade the Noise, FTN Daily for the fantasy aspect, ftndaily.com, and also FTN Bets for the betting portion. There's a ton of tools there. Any sport you can imagine, just go check them out. Use the promo code MAYO, and that'll get you basically let them know that we sent you, and would be super beneficial. So with all that out of the way, I think we're good to start going division by division here.
Just a quick intro on ourselves, just really quick. You can see where you can follow us probably right below. Follow us on Twitter if you want more information. Me and Matt, just real quick before we get going, we are kind of best friends since third grade, played hockey our whole lives together, always kind of doing just whatever. We got involved with the sport in DraftKings. Matt is definitely a sharp, really, really top player. You'll see him on the top of the leaderboard all the time if you play on DraftKings or FanDuel or what have you. And really 4 years ago, the main podcast we listened to went away. We got involved, as I mentioned. So Matt, is there anything else you want to just say about ourselves before we get going?
Is there
anything you want to say?
If you know us, like you said, I do play a decent amount of DraftKings. I'm Moods over on DraftKings. DJ Sabers. So hopefully you'll see him up there this year. But the podcast we do, I have done for a while, is the Morning Skate podcast, and we'll be sure to just get that across when you need more of us. You can find us on Twitter and all that. We'll talk about it at the end of the show, though. So, so we have...
As the name implies, we are both Sabres fans. So we've been very sad for a long time, but we're not going to just focus on one team. So, Matt, I'll let you get back to it right now. Let's get kicking with what we want to talk about.
All right. So, so like I said, we're going to go division by division here. We have some pretty fancy graphic overlays. So obviously, if you're listening to the audio podcast, that might not necessarily be the most useful thing to you. But that means you should probably check out the YouTube channel, because it's super clear, easy to follow, and you can sort of see the lines that we're talking about as we go through this. So we will go team by team through each division, talking about the point over-unders, the divisional odds, the ultimate Stanley Cup odds, and then their odds to make the playoffs. So, we won't cover all of those things, but just sort of pointing out, where the best action is, what the best bets are, that sort of thing. And then toward the end of the show, you'll get some of our thoughts on the player awards. So, the MVP, the Norris, best defenseman, things like that. So let's get it started here, going over to the East Division, and we'll start alphabetical order, the Boston Bruins. Now, they're probably the powerhouse in this division. They've been good for, they've been good for years now, over a decade, the perfection line. Not really together to start the year. David Pastrnak will be out for an extended period of time. Brad Marchand seems like he's on the mend. He's been practicing in training camp, but he doesn't seem cleared for night one. So DJ, just sort of to preempt this, these guys are the favorites in the East Division. 2.5, I guess plus 250 odds to win the division. How do you feel about that? And just sort of what are your thoughts on this team?
Yeah, I mean, the Boston Bruins, I think the number one thing that comes up is the culture of the Bruins. I mean, they somehow find a way to just get these bottom line scores to contribute every year. Every year, think, well, how are they going to continue? They're getting older. Pastrnak, kind of the young guy there, but Marchand and Patrice Bergeron, a bit older. They always find a way to get it done. I can't see a scenario where they miss the playoffs. It would really have to be some of these injuries that you mentioned lagging on or continuing and coming back again. The big change for the Bruins is Chara going over, not resigning, I guess, and going to Washington. We get, McAvoy kind of taking over the reins there on defense, the new captain in Bergeron. I don't love their odds to win the division. It's, not a ton of equity, pretty, random how this is going to sort out, shortened schedule. I don't think the odds really figured that in very well, the, condensing the games and everything and how that'll play. I love them to make the playoffs. Again, not a ton of equity there. I'm not sure if I put a lot on it because, what are you going to benefit? Unless we're going to parlay this thing. I don't love it. The point total, 71.5 seems incredibly fair. To make the playoffs this year, we're kind of looking at 61 to 65 points. That's kind of your middle ground. If you're above 65, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of where you're going to make the playoffs. They're going to get there. I doubt Vegas is that off. I have 112 points at stake. I like him around 70. I think that's fair. If you want to go a smidge under, I think if you want to get crazy, if you really are a heavy gambler and maybe go with, under on the points and losing the division and then making the playoffs would be how I look at this. And that's kind of my angle on the Bruins.
Yeah. So, I think the main thing that honestly almost is sort of subconsciously maybe, going into what you were saying is that Torrey Krug left this team, and that seems like a big loss right off the draw. But Matt Grzelcyk has sort of been groomed for this for the last few years, and it looks like he's stepping right into that second pair, first power play role that Krug occupied. So, McAvoy on the top pair should be able to carry whoever, winds up there. With him, it's been Jeremy Lauzon, very, very irrelevant player. But just sort of, I think if Grzelcyk is even 95% of what Torrey Krug brought to the table, that this team will be fine. Obviously, that's a big ask, but I think Grzelcyk's a really good player. So, to me, I think they're a pretty good bet to make the playoffs minus 400. That seems pretty easy. But like you, I think I'm betting the under on their 71.5 point total there. So, going over from there into Buffalo, you can see DJ wearing his Sabres gear. They brought in Taylor Hall, really exciting player, and should be a really exciting line skating with Jack Eichel. They are one of the basement dwellers in this division, though, based on some of the early returns. We have a point total of 54.5. Again, that's in 56 games. So, just under an 80-point pace, basically, for the Sabres there. 20-1 to win the division and plus 325 to make the playoffs. Not really thinking the Sabres are a cup contender. What are your thoughts on that number, and where do you think they fit in this division?
I mean, obviously I want it to be low, but I think I think that Vegas, it's tough to really argue too much. A lot of unproven stuff here. Ralph Kruger comes in last year. I don't think he changed enough in the right way for me, but I think coming into this year with Hall, Stahl, potentially Dylan Cousins, who we might mention as a very out there pick for Calder. It's going to be interesting. Gergensen's out for the year now. Goaltending is the main concern here, though. Last year, it was abysmal. Olmark was good. He got hurt. Carter Hutton can track the puck. Season over. If you like the goaltending, I think you have a chance to conceivably see them in the playoffs. Olmark has to step it up. Hutton has to be able to track the puck again. I think if you do pick them as a playoff team, though, you should probably put Jack Eichel as maybe like a top 3 in the Hart as bet to go with that. It's kind of a good correlation. If the Sabres make the playoffs, Jack Eichel probably is in the Hart conversation, as he was last year until the Sabres nose that dive right out of everything to take Jack Quinn in the top 10. So yeah, I like it. I think that if again 63 points, kind of the middle ground of making the playoffs, that's 8.5 short. I think not looking great. I really like the over. That's how I'm definitely biased. So don't take my word for this one. But Matt, thoughts on the Sabres?
With a revamped top 6, Eric Stahl comes in and really shores up the position they've struggled at for years. I mean, since they got Eichel, they really haven't. Well, since they traded Ryan O'Reilly for a bag of pucks, they haven't really had a reliable second center. So maybe Stahl can fill the gap there for a year and sort of push them. This is their one chance though. Hall probably walks after this year. So I think there is a little bit of narrative street year, short season. Players love Ralph Kruger. That's why Taylor Hall showed up. Like you, I think it's a decent bet to bet they're over on the points. I'm sort of passing on the rest of them though. It's very similar odds, but I think a very worse sort of situation is New Jersey. Like the Sabres, as of the weekend before the season started, they're also at 54.5 team total, or point over under, with 25-1 odds to win the division and plus 350 to make the playoffs. To me, this seems like a clear stay away. If you want to bet them to miss the playoffs, you could also do that. I think that's a very, very good bet, even at pretty, tough money. I think you're getting them at about minus 450, which is always, it's tough to lock up that much money for that period of time. But the Devils, Corey Crawford sort of walked out on them, retired just the other day. Very interesting situation there. So obviously all the best to him and his family if there's actually something going on there. But on the ice, that really hurts them. Last year they had some of the worst backup goaltending in the league. Mackenzie Blackwood's a stud, but can he keep that up? Or was that just a one-season fluke? That's just sort of what remains to be seen. And the continued growth from guys like Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes will just be absolutely crucial to this team getting there. So to me, this is sort of easy under. I think they're the bottom of this division for sure. Under 54.5 sounds good. But what about you, DJ?
No, I totally agree. Everything you said, I do not like this bet. I think that the big thing that we didn't mention was the defense is bad. I like Ty Smith as a young gun to get in there and maybe do something, but it's not going to be enough. Ryan Murray and PK Subban, top pair. Unless if Subban really bounces back, it's not good. Mackenzie Blackwood will have to legitimately go 950, like nuclear level of unbelievableness. I can't see it happening. I don't want to go crazy into detail here. Don't really like the Devils in any aspect. They're just a weak team that probably is just going to be on the basement of this.
Hear me out. PK Subban redemption narrative. Lindsey Vonn engagement off. PK Subban shows up this year. He's gunning for the Norris. He got robbed of the Norris.
Oh God,
coming for it. He's motivated.
If you pick them to make the playoffs, PK Norris, easy money. You got it. Their correlation's right there for you.
Yeah, no. So, all right. Next up here, we have two teams with very similar projections and also two very similar locations. So we've got the Islanders and the Rangers here. The Islanders are they're both at 61.5 for their over and under, and then the Islanders are 10-1 to win the division. The Rangers are 8-1 to win the division. And then both teams are plus 130 to make the playoffs. So they're a little bit, there's definitely some equity there, I think, depending on which team you prefer here. So let's sort of knock these teams both out at the same time. Between the Islanders and the Rangers, who do you prefer here? And what's your outlook for them?
I think it's really tough because every year we get into the Islanders, and I always say, man, there's no way. There's just no way they're going to do it again. They caught lightning in a bottle a couple years in a row. Teams are going to start figuring them out, but you just can't figure out Trotz, I guess. He just somehow finds a way to bore the game down to the most boring level. For daily fantasy players, going against the Islanders, sludges up the game a good bit. I think the Islanders are a little bit better with the experience. They're not really bringing anyone major in. I mean, they got JPG last year, John Gabriel Peugeot. I can't think of anyone that's going to make a huge difference other than maybe Sorokin, the rookie goaltender from Russia, backing up the longtime Russian goaltender Semyon Varlamov. I like them a little more. The Rangers, definitely more of your who knows. They have a lot of young guys coming in as far as Lafreniere and Shesterkin, and that taking over the reins from Hendrik Lundqvist has been a long time. I think, both of them at the same odds. I got to take the Islanders, even though I like the Rangers offense a good amount more. Goaltending, I think, is pretty even, but really defense is where it comes down to. And the Rangers defense, barring someone really stepping up, I don't think it's very good. It was bad last year. And the Islanders defense, I mean, people that have listened to us before, I love Ryan Pulock, one of my favorites. I think, they do lose Devin Taves, but I still think they have a very, very sound defensive unit that's going to just get them to the playoffs, or at least very close. And the Rangers, I think, just missing. So I think I go over on the Islanders as far as the 63-point playoffs, and then the under on the Rangers.
Yeah, so for me, this is sort of the, it actually sort of it's captured in the odds because the Rangers are 8-1 to win the division and the Islanders are 10-1. The Rangers seem like they have such a high ceiling relative, relative to this division, honestly. We've talked about Boston being banged up. We'll also talk about Pittsburgh and Washington sort of in the afterlight of their studs' careers. So there's definitely some possibility that Panarin leads this team and guys like Lafreniere and Kakko step up and really just take this team to the absolute next level. For that reason, I think I'm more comfortable betting on the Rangers than I am the Islanders. The other thing with the Islanders is that you just gave away Devon Taves for nothing. Like literally you got 2 second rounders, but if you're a team that's built to win now, their cap situation's pretty tough, which is why they had to trade in the first place. But this is the time you're going to do it, and you're you're sending off guys like that. I don't know. I don't see it with the Islanders. So I think making an upside bet on someone like the Rangers is the way to go for me. So something like 8-1 to win the division, I think is my favorite bet there. It's otherwise though, I think I'm staying away because as we'll talk about with these next 3 teams, it seems like the top 4 in my mind is relatively concrete. So just getting to the next team, we have the Flyers here. Basically the favorites to win the division outside of Boston, of course, at a over under 67.5 and almost 4-1 odds. It's plus 375 on them to win the division. And so I'll give you the pitch for the Flyers because I do recall last year, if you're listening to the Morning Skate podcast, I also gave this pitch last year. And frankly, last season feels like a decade ago, so I don't quite remember if this happened. But the Flyers were among the best teams in the conference last year. And here it is for the Flyers. They have probably one of the best players in the past 10 years, Claude Giroux. He's not at the peak of his powers, but he's still really freaking good. They have really young defensemen in Provorov. If Gostisbehere returns to form, Sanheim is, really impressive. And even guys like Phil Myers and Robert Haig, they are loaded with good defensemen. They have Carter Hart in net. The Flyers with reliable goaltending. I mean, that hasn't happened in forever. So really, to me, it just comes down to there's a lot of offensive potential here, but I just think they're really sound defensively. And that's why I like this team. I like them to make the playoffs. I think they're a great cup pick at 17-1. I just think this is one of the premier teams in the East and certainly in the NHL as well.
Yeah, no, I would echo everything you just said. I won't even try to go too long on them because everything you said was exactly how I feel. They're loaded. They even get Nolan Patrick back, who I still have a lot of time for. I mean, what was going on with him last year was devastating. But he's back. He's going to be playing, adding another potential top end center. I mean, we don't know. Number 2 pick. obviously hasn't lived up to that hype, but has had some very weird injuries along the way. So if he can be back and he can be a difference maker as well, that's just going to add another piece to that team that they didn't need, but they're going to get. So yeah, I 100% agreement with them. I'm very, very high on the Islanders on all of these. They could even be a cup contender. I definitely think so. It's going to come down to Calder, Hart, but I think he's great. So we can just move right over to the first game. Is going to be the whole season, Flyers versus Penguins. So move right over to the Penguins if you're ready. The Penguins, again, Sidney Crosby, Malkin, Letang, all still there. Definitely, I think they got a little bit weaker, but still, one of the premium teams. Actually, on this, they have the same exact point total as the Flyers. I definitely like the Flyers a bit more, but the Penguins back again with all really the top end team. I mean, if Crosby's there, then missing the playoffs is always tough. He's the second best player in the world. Top line with Gensel right now. Rodriguez a little bit weird, but I still think they have enough. I love the addition of Jason Zucker on that team. I think he's a difference maker. They got at the deadline last year, but the number one guy I gotta mention is John Marino. I'm a fanboy of what he can do. So I like them a lot. And as long as the goaltending's there, which is the question mark, I think they're a playoff team for sure. So Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, the John Marino thing is really weird to me. I mean, he came out of literally nowhere and just everyone just fawns over him. Like, I get it, he's good, but like, I don't know, is he still the difference maker on this and on a team with Sidney Crosby and Kenny Malkin? I don't know. Shedding Jack Johnson, honestly, might be the best thing they did this offseason. You just get so much better just based on that alone. But here's one thing that's a bit concerning with Pittsburgh. Kasperi Kapanen was sort of traded for in the offseason and slotted in to be Sidney Crosby's, first line right winger. He's not been able to practice with the team yet due to some, I think, visa issues and following like quarantine, just the way this whole season's going to go. Just one of those weird things where like this guy, I had really high hopes for Kapanen coming in, and now he's missing out on, what practice time you do get with Crosby. Crosby's notoriously really hard to play with. It doesn't seem that hard from the outside. Like, to be honest, let's be real. Like, just put your stick on the ice and go toward the net, and you should get, 15 goals, no problem. But you've heard it enough where it might be true. So if they can't figure out that first line, in time, or if Kapanen just really struggles, I think that could be sort of the, just the reason why I think the Flyers much above them. But yeah, so we can go from there over.
Well, I have to bring up one thing, just really quick. Last thing on the Penguins, Matt. I mentioned it on our podcast. John Marino, as I mentioned, who is the team that drafted him 154th overall in 2015?
I'm gonna guess it's a team that needs defensemen. So it's gonna be very funny when you tell me it's going to be Edmonton.
It is Edmonton. Edmonton Oilers had him, and they just let him go for nothing. Look up that deal if you want. That's the kind of coverage you're going to get here with me and Matt. But yeah, no, John Marino and Edmonton. I mean, just another one of the guys that Edmonton got let go. Hilarious, always. They just can't seem to figure it out. Neither can the Sabres. Who am I to judge? But yeah,
well, speaking of guys Edmonton let go who turned into useful players on Pittsburgh. Justin Schultz. He leaves Pittsburgh. We'll talk more about that in a following segment, so stay tuned there. But we go over to Washington, and here's the Alex Ovechkin show. Like, it's one of Ovi's final years in the league. I'm very much looking forward to watching him. As a team, their over/under is 66.5, just a smidge below the Flyers and the Penguins, and they also have 4-1 odds to win the division. So, to me, this seems like the most sort of fragile of a team. Like, if one thing goes wrong for them, be it, a key injury to a guy like Carlson or Samsonov, or, I'm not even going to mention Ovechkin because Ovechkin doesn't get hurt. But if something were to go wrong, this team doesn't seem to have the depth anymore to sort of, fill it in from below. So this is something where I think you're sort of betting on the team to stay healthy and to sort of avoid the regression monster that comes for, like some players like maybe John Carlson, who, should be good again this year, but also had just an incredible season last year. So for me, this seems like the team, if you're looking to bet against one of the sort of core four teams here in this newly configured East Division, taking the under and letting, one of the other teams sort of slide up into that spot. So, DJ, what are your thoughts though on Washington?
No, I'm honestly, again, echo the same thing. I think that they're the most volatile as well as far as missing and should make it, plus 400 to win the division, minus 195 to make the playoffs. A lot of people are going to kind of pencil them in. Definitely the regression monster comes for all of us eventually. And it could be there. I love Ovechkin though in his potential final year. We don't know. We hope not, but it's always in the back of our minds. He's obviously really taken over the role as a dad, and you see all the videos of him with his kid, and he's already mentioned, wanting to be there. So it's going to be tough. I already have my narrative that he's waiting for that Russian superstar to come up, the 15-year-old who I'm not going to even try his name right now, unless you can remember it.
No.
He's waiting for Cyborg Ovechkin to go out for Cyborg 2 to come in. I'll look up his name in a minute. But yeah, so I think it's not Ovechkin's last year, but I have this feeling all these grizzled veterans, shortened season, I don't know if it's going to help or hurt. I think a lot of people could talk themselves into either way. The veterans have more, time playing back-to-back-to-back games. You get some of these college kids that come in, a younger team, they're not used to playing as many games as quickly. So it could benefit that way. But then the same token, older players might get worn down faster from all the back-to-back-to-back games and kind of reduce time off schedule. You could really talk yourself into either way. I still like them as a playoff team. I think 66 is perfect for them. I think they could end up getting in at like 65, 60, 66 right there. So I'm in on it, but everything you said, they're the most volatile. So if you're going to put in a Buffalo Sabres or a Rangers or an Islanders over any team, I would also just take Washington missing the playoffs with it. So are we ready to just give our top four and then move on to the West?
Yeah. And so just one thing from sort of like a macro perspective, when you're thinking about, how to bet these sort of preseason odds, so to speak, in years past, obviously this is not that different in terms of, we have these teams, X amount are going to make the playoffs. But what makes this season so kind of special is that these teams are only playing each other. Like you're not getting the sort of it's almost like a limiting factor when you get to play 2 games against every other team in the league. Here the cream's going to rise to the cream's going to rise to the top. Meaning, when you like Boston, you like them more than the Sabres, Devils, whatever. And you're sort of banking on them getting those points in those games against inferior teams. And so that makes it really easy, I think, to just sort of say, rank these teams 1 through 8, and the top 4 are more likely to make the playoffs than they were in years past, because you're not really getting those sort of added variants of playing a bunch of different teams all the time. You're only playing against one another. So I think that's, a really interesting thing to think about. And so for me, this isn't the division where I want to get too crazy. It just really seems to me like the top 4 teams are the best 4 teams, and it's not necessarily all that close. So I like the Flyers to win the division. I think they're coming out and they're going to make a run in the playoffs. Whichever team gets out of this division, by the way, I think will be the best. Will be among the top 2, because this division's loaded, man. And so you're going to need one heck of a season to make it. So give me the Flyers first. I'll take Pittsburgh second, Boston third, and then I think Washington does manage to get there, and hopefully with some Ovi heroics involved.
Yeah, no, I really pretty similar again. I want to put Buffalo in so bad. I just can't do it. I know in my heart, they're in the playoffs in my heart, but in my mind, it's Philly 1, Boston 2, Penguins 3, Washington 4, which is probably almost exactly what the odds say. I don't really see any of these teams missing, but the Islanders or the Rangers could slip in. I think the Sabres, if they could really catch lightning in a bottle, if Olmark can take flight, but the goaltending's too weak. And that Russian player I was talking about, Michkov, definitely Michkov is his last name. How you say his first name, I'm definitely going to be butchering. But look him up if you want to look up that next first overall pick after it's not this draft, the next draft. No, 2023.
2023, yeah, a couple years down the road.
Yeah, a couple years down the road. Yeah. Because, it's Shane Wright and then him, I believe. Okay, so we can kick it over to the West, maybe move a little bit faster this time. I feel like we're going to be running a little long. I think we're okay. Okay, we're okay.
We'll
start.
Yeah, so the West seems a little bit more wide open to me. We do have the top being Vegas and Colorado. We'll get to them in order, but just realistically speaking, though, there's not a lot after that. So I am looking forward to sort of talking through this. First, we have Anaheim, and right now they're at a 53.5 point total. DJ, as you were mentioning before, the playoff cutoff should be somewhere in the neighborhood of the low 60s. And so, if you are paying close attention, you'll see that only 3 of these teams are even projected above 61.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
It sort of leaves a lot of anyway. So Anaheim at 53.5. That seems, like a little too good to be true to me. Plus 225 to make the playoffs is also just a little bit low. So I think that the over there is honestly very much so in play. 60-1 cup odds isn't great, but I think the Ducks, I say this every year, it feels like, and maybe I'm just wrong, but backed by John Gibson, you can make a lot of mistakes, but when you have the firepower up front with Rickard Rakell and, Jacob Silfverberg isn't necessarily the most offensively gifted player, but man, is he effective. And so I think there's just enough here for them to sort of make a push and to be better than expected. I love the addition of Kevin Shattenkirk. I think he's sort of, we saw last year in Tampa, he's obviously not washed. Maybe the Rangers had something to do with that. But, I think he comes in, he mans that first power play, and they just are good. Like last year, they were the league's most ineffective power play. I think it has to get better. And in this division, I don't think they'll have too much of a problem, just figuring that out. And, there's a lot of rope to play with. You don't need to be perfect to make the playoffs in this division. So that's my pitch for the Ducks here. But DJ, tell me what your thoughts are.
I'm on board. I'm on board with the Ducks. I'm very high on them. I think it's the Gibson. It's also, I really think they have a sound defense. I mean, the Shattenkirk addition is huge. Fowler, Manson, Lindholm. I think they'll be able to shut down some of these weaker teams. And really the main reason is how weak this division is. That gives them such an opportunity to get hot with Gibson, going on a run and making a chance of these playoffs. A condensed schedule really helps this team a lot. They are going to be rostering quite a young team. They have Troy Terry, Sam Steele, stuff like that. Sonny Milano, maybe Trevor Zegras, and a couple others from the World Juniors, if you watched, that could make this team. Going to be a young team. Hopefully they can find one of those guys to step up big time. A lot of former first round picks. And if you watch the World Juniors, you would have noticed Anaheim Ducks prospect to Anaheim Ducks prospect to Anaheim Ducks prospect for a goal. There was so many involved. So if they could get a couple of guys to come in, find some secondary scoring, they could be dangerous in the division because it is weak. I'm not as high on the next team, the Coyotes, what we're going to get to in a second. Obviously, the Kings are the basement dweller, potentially of the league, barring a crazy turnaround. And I don't like the Sharks. It's like they're right there. They just got to take care of business, get hot at the right time, and they can make the playoffs. I really think that these odds are really low on them, and they're not taking into account how bad this division is. Obviously, we could totally eat our words if Gibson gets hurt and they just end up tanking. Ryan Miller, presumably the backup. He's fine as a backup, but as a starter, yikes. So they are one injury away from being, right at the basement level. But John Gibson is maybe the best goalie in the league.
Yeah. All right. So a team that a lot of people maybe even forgot existed in Arizona here. Not without their fair share of controversy with the draft and all of that, but you just look at them and you're like, how is this team capped out? Like, what have they done? They're
a lot of bad moves.
Yeah, a lot of bad moves. Not a lot of good young players. So, man, Arizona, I think, is in for a tough season. Yep. They tried to trade Ekman Larson and they didn't even manage to do that. It's just really hard to see the path forward for the next couple of years with them. And frankly, for a team that did make the playoffs, they did beat Nashville in the play-in round, only to get absolutely smoked by Colorado, but whatever. These numbers seem really to sort of reflect that with a over-under of only 56.5, 60-1 cup odds for, a playoff team. it seems like they're really baking in those sort of struggles. And so that's why I'm not an immediate sort of just smash the under, because it does seem like, it does seem like there is a little bit of overreaction maybe to, what it's a decent roster, but in no way should it be the final form of this team. And so when you look at something like 15-1 odds, like to win the division, like no, like, just pass on that. But to make the playoffs at plus 200, I think is an okay bet. So I don't know, DJ, what are your thoughts there with this team and how they're currently constructed?
I mean, I don't like them to make the playoffs, but I think they'll be right on the cusp. They're not good, but they're not terrible. I do think that if they are struggling, and they will find a way to move OEL. The teams want him. The price wasn't there. If he has a hot start, he can move on. So if you do season long or dynasty leagues or anything like that, I think Chuchrin is going to be a great addition. Either grab him now or grab him later. I have him on my team, and for our dynasty league, I'm in with Matt, and I'm pretty excited to see what he can do. So I do like him a lot. I think that goaltending is strong here. But again, one of these guys could easily move, and Kemper or Ranta if they're not playing well. But it's a great tandem. So that is what gets me most excited about them. I'm pretty high on the goaltending, but I'm not as high on the team. So I think if they're struggling, they're going to trade off some assets. It's a weak division. I think 56 again is just it's almost a perfect number. I'm not going to even touch it because I think there's no point. There's just not enough here for me to think to do it, because if they do struggle, they might trade off some assets, but I don't think that's going to make a huge difference playing these same teams over and over again. They're not going to be playing Boston a couple of nights down the road, nothing like that. They're not going on a big Eastern Conference trip late in the year where we can kind of, judge that better. So I say I just kind of am out on betting on them really at all, because it's very volatile in this division. And
hey, if you don't have to watch the Coyotes play hockey, if you have no emotional investment, no financial investment, honestly, that's probably for the best, because
there you go. Perfect. See,
there's not much there.
There's life advice involved in this podcast as well. So don't even end video streams. So don't even worry about.
Spend your time. Spend your time on more interesting teams like the Colorado Avalanche, who might just go Harlem Globetrotters on this division. Honestly, just like outside of Vegas, we'll see. But Colorado is I think the favorite overall to win the cup at 7-1. Like, they are just a really, really, really sound team, top to bottom. Obviously led by Nate McKinnon. Their point total is you need 78 points from them in order to hit the over in 56 games.
112 points. It's what I mean, mental math in your head if you want, Matt. You're more of the quick math guy. That's got to be a crazy point pace.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to try and do that math in my head, but 110, something like that. 100, just
right?
nuts.
Yeah, it's got to be up there.
So anyway, sort of, what we're looking at here is a team that was already really good. They ended up losing to the Stars in the bubble and all that. It was honestly, I think, one of the best series there. That one ended in Game 7 overtime too. Like, just had everything. Nate McKinnon was a man possessed, and frankly, he's probably going to just do that again here. And so, man, I do love this team. It's really tough at these, just really high numbers to make one of these bets. But when you're sort of comparing Colorado and Vegas, who have very similar odds, I do think I like Colorado more. I just think they're more dynamic. There's obviously questions of, their bottom six and whatnot, but just when it comes to Vegas not being able to score, that seems like more of a long-term thing. In Colorado, it just seems like they have sort of everything that Vegas does with a little bit of extra scoring touch. So that's sort of my lean here. But anyway, any specific thoughts on any of these numbers, or should we just move on to LA?
I guess real quick, I think it's definitely more of a parlay type of bet with them than trying to just put a bunch of money on Colorado. There's not enough equity there. I love line 3. I didn't mention they have a shutdown line in line 3 to shut down a top forward unit. They have the top end scoring on both lines. Kadri took flight in the playoffs. Defense is absolutely loaded. Taves, McCarr, Gerard, Johnson, Graves. I mean, just stacked up. I can't see a scenario where they miss the playoffs. Great. I like Graves. I have no problem. I mean, is he in daily fantasy circles kind of like this enigma of a player, sure. I'm a big fan of this team. I
All right.
have them definitely as a cup favorite, but we could just
Look,
there's really not we could gush about Colorado all day. Also, they're reverse retro jersey. If you like hockey jerseys, definitely give me a follow. Give me I got to get one of those. I need a Bakar.
yeah. Well, anyway, I'm glad they went out and got Devontae's because the regression monster ain't
They
seen
needed it.
nothing
I mean,
like this Ryan Graves season coming. Like the dude was like, I think he led the league in plus minus despite being a negative shot share player and just getting killed and expected goal. Like just really, really, just kind of the ire of my existence last season because he just kept on doing it. So anyway, that's pretty part and parcel because the team around him is just so freaking good that I'm not too worried about it. But just him specifically as a player, man, I don't see it. So anyway,
let's get to
speaking of a
they
team
the worst?
Yeah, the absolute worst.
No, it's Detroit. Detroit is the worst, though. I mean, that we're covering in this division, but Detroit is the only team lower than LA, I believe, as far as points.
I don't even. I can check that real quick. I don't think that's true though.
It's got to be close.
Anyway,
yeah,
talk about LA.
Talk about. I mean, LA is very bad, but I think they have at least a couple guys worth considering as like fantasy assets. Other than that, I have no interest in any of these lines. 49.5 is incredibly low. As we mentioned, 112 points. It's an incredibly low pace, but I don't like anyone on defense for them, really, outside of a new guy coming in. Mata's bad. Doughty's getting much worse. Just their defense is bad. Goaltending is falling off. Cal Peterson not probably going to get you there quick, losing a lot of what he used to have. And I have no interest. They pick up Athens. I thought that was interesting. Athens, you kind of trying to maybe be a highlight here on an otherwise pretty abysmal team. I think other than, in season long, I don't think Jeff Carter is the worst player in the world, but you have a pretty deep league. Other than that, it's just there's not much here to talk about. They're terrible. They're going to be really bad. Quentin Byfield, if he does step in, could be a guy to consider as a decent long shot for the Calder. I don't have the odds in front of me, right? He is.
So let's.
I don't even know because he's plus 117. But
yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. Let's unpack that because I think that the thing with LA, specifically the Quentin Byfield discussion, is that their top line and their top power play seems pretty set in stone. And frankly, when it comes to like season long stuff, I actually do like taking a shot at guys like Kopitar and Dustin Brown because you're getting them so late in your drafts. Not to say that I think this team is, on pace for anything spectacular this year or anything, but the top end guys still are there. I mean, Kopitar's 2 years removed from being in the Hart picture. I think he was the one where the magician had to turn over the cards or something ridiculous. That very, very funny event that I think, anyway, that just sticks in my mind.
NHL Awards card trick. Look it up.
Yeah, no, it's very funny. And so there is enough.
YouTube, subscribe. Okay.
Yeah, there is enough here.
Okay.
In terms of youth that I don't think this, 50 points is out of the picture. Frankly, of the bottom feeders here, I actually might like them. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough for me to sort of take apart my feelings there, but I think there is a decent amount here to like, especially from a daily fantasy perspective when we get into the season. So I think we can just leave the discussion there and talk a little bit more about Byfield when we get to the Calder. But moving over to Minnesota
Wild are next.
Yeah. This is a team that, frankly, I've loved for years at this point. Like they just really seem to always have these really great underlying numbers. And then they just sort of fall apart because their goaltending is terrible. And, some of that has to do with Devin Dubnyk, who is gone and, see you later out in San Jose now. But part of that also, I think, is just because they do such a good job defensively that it might just, when they do break down, it might be, a bit tougher. So I'm really interested to see how a guy like Cam Talbot steps in. And if he can be even a league average goalie behind a league elite defense, this team should have no problem waltzing through this division. That's sort of, a very pie in the sky type take though. As far as specific players on this team, I mean, Kevin Fiala last year was unbelievable. Like, if you want to talk about a guy who broke out, second half of the season into the bubble, I think Kevin Fiala is right up there among, sort of the top names you would think of. So if he's able to continue that success into this season, he's a guy who I love as a long shot for just about anything. If you can find his name anywhere, frankly, I haven't even been able to find him in terms of betting. But fantasy, all of that, Kevin Fiala is a mega massive buy for me. And getting a guy like Kirill Kaprizov, who should man the first power play with him, and is just incredibly creative and was one of the KHL's best players before he came over to the States. Like, there might be a little bit of scoring here too, which is weird to say about a Minnesota team that's been completely devoid of it for many seasons now.
Yeah, 100%. Everything you said, I agree with. Again, I mean, it's that top power play unit with Parise, Fiala, Kaprizov, Dumba, Spurgeon. I mean, that could be really, really strong if that's what they end up going with. I do like this team a lot. I think the one, Stalak will be out for a little bit of time. Corello also shouldn't start the year, I don't believe. So I don't love Cam Talbot. That's my biggest concern here, but he should get a bit of the workload early in the season. I do like Capo Kakinen, the third string, I guess, if you will. Last year, he stepped in for a few games. He looked really strong for them. So I think my hottest of hot takes is that he ends up, if you have dynasty teams, maybe if you have an extra spot in your prospect pool, grab him, because I think he could end up making a move here to take over. I'm hoping, I guess. Maybe it's the wishful thinking because I have him. But I really do like what they have coming up the pipeline in that. Talbot is my biggest concern here, but if Talbot and Stalak, if he gets back and healthy again, which I don't think he's out long term, and Capo could end up being a tandem that could get it done for them. If they could spread the wealth of all three, could get it done. I do have them making the playoffs. I like that bet a good bit. The only other team that we're going to get to at the end here is the Blues, and them kind of the 3-4 in my eyes potentially. So. So is there anything else you wanted to mention with the Wild, or do you want to get over to the Sharks?
No, let's go over to the Sharks. Here's a San Jose team 2 years removed from being considered among the league's best. Last year was, the season from hell for them. Just terrible, awful. You can't say enough bad things about their year last year. And they went out and shored up their goaltending situation by getting Devin Dubnyk, the league's worst goaltender. I want to love this roster because, when you have Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, Logan Couture, Tomas Hertl, that should be enough, to beat out these mostly bad teams otherwise. But man, their goaltending is just really tough to overcome. So I think 52.5, like we mentioned, these point totals seem a little skewed just in terms of all of these low teams seem really low. So honestly, there might be some value in getting them at the over and still not picking them to make the playoffs. And so I think that's what I'll do. I just think that Erik Karlsson's shaped for a big bounce back season. He's not Brent Burns in that he's, I think, 4 years younger than Brent Burns. We're sort of talking about two similar players in terms of their just overall offensive dominance, but Karlsson shouldn't be on such a precipitous decline. So hopefully this extra time off sort of helped him heal up and he's, firing on all cylinders. So just from a, guy to keep an eye on going into the season, someone named John Leonard is in their top 6. And from all accounts, he actually might be a pretty decent player. So I found that really interesting because, almost no one's going to talk about it. And so I think that he's a name to keep an eye on and see if he can sort of carve out a role here because there's plenty of opportunities given their lack of depth here. So how do you feel about them sort of hitting, 53 points or over? And do you think there's a shot that this team makes the playoffs?
I like the under, honestly, and I don't think they have a shot at making the playoffs for really the goaltending reasons. And I think they're not even a good cap team, I don't believe. I mean, they have a lot tied up in a few guys. I think they find a way to sell off a couple guys if they can, make some trades, they gotta get in on this rebuild. I don't see how they don't start it now. If they are bad to start the year and the goaltending isn't there, they got to try to move on from Couture and maybe even Hertl could be a guy that gets talked about. So I'm a little bit low on them. I do like Ryan Donato as another guy that was kind of featured on some of the power play units. I think if you do any best balls, which we're kind of getting way out there now, but we kind of both, I think, like Carlson as a end of the best ball draft, high upside guy, um, because he could, definitely take over. And if Burns goes down, he could definitely take over. And they might even move him to a team that could really, really feature him. So other than that, though, I'm kind of way low on them. The goaltending is a train wreck. I'm out on them completely.
All right.
I would say, yeah.
All right, I won't fight you too much on that because I really want to like the Sharks. And here's the team in the St. Louis Blues that I really like the Sharks. I like the pieces, but I'm not sure I see it from, and that might be going on a limb because they're supposed to hit 70.5 points this season. And the St. Louis Blues
stealing my thunder right now because I was going to keep them out of they're not in the playoffs, but I was getting my big thunder, but I thought you liked the Blues a lot, so I was going to be this is the big one for us.
No, like here's the thing. Like I feel like I do like a lot of the pieces there. I mean, I love the addition of Mike Hoffman, almost a 1-for-1 replacement of Vladimir Tarasenko. That's about as good as you're going to do on the open market. Obviously O'Reilly was, he's among the top centers in the league. You lost Pietrangelo. You actually bring in Torrey Krug, who's, he's a very serviceable first power play. We'll see what he can do with extended minutes. And I like it. And then I just sort of look at, they're running guys like Barbashev and guys like that sort of slide up the lineup from time to time. And it's like, is that really, a team that I think is on the same level as a Vegas or Colorado? And they're just sort of penciling in the Blues to the playoffs here too. And this is a team that I think is showing some cracks. DJ, I don't know if you want to talk about Bennington at all, but there's just a little bit here that's like, there's some signals going off when, you're missing a guy like Tarasenko. We're just sort of assuming that these replacements are as good as the original. And maybe that's not the smartest idea. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts if you're echoing my sentiment.
No, I'm low on them, and I'm low on Bennington in general as a goalie. I just he has the 1 year and they give him the big contract, and obviously he wins a cup for the St. Louis Blues. He deserved it. I'm low on Bennington. They get rid of Jake Allen again, kind of a nice cap move for them. Ville Husso, I don't know how many games he's played, is kind of perceivably going to be the backup there. Don't know much about him. I'm just low on this team for many reasons. I mean, Pietrangelo out. Krug in, I don't think it's as big of a loss as people might think. It's still a bit of a downgrade, but I'm not super bad about that. I just don't think they have much depth. I don't know how good Mike Hoffman's going to be, but he should be fine. Tarasenko, when he comes back, will help a lot, but I just kind of have them as a team that really could end up getting that regression that I think fits them more. Not a ton of star power on this team, which is okay. They didn't ride any of them to the playoffs, but I could see them missing. I really can. Even though this division's weak, I think that, they could, Binnington doesn't show up, they could miss it. And I like the Wild a bit more. So they might slip in at 4 and be a team to watch in the playoffs, or they could just miss if another team could find a way. So I really, it's the goaltending for me here and just lack of secondary scoring that I think will catch them. I think.
Yeah. So
just not high on it.
To cap off the Blues discussion, a player that I'm really high on this year is David Perron. I think he's one of the only right-hand shooters on that team. He's going to be almost entrenched on their top power play unit, and he's going to be running shotgun with Ryan O'Reilly, and it looks like Jaden Schwartz to begin the season. That's awesome. He lit it up against Vancouver. They ended up losing that series, which was frankly ridiculous. But I think Perron's really I guess almost like a renaissance in terms of just like he was a productive player and sort of fell off for a bit. But he's a guy I think this year is just in one of the most perfect spots imaginable, just given his power play usage and 5-on-5 with Ryan O'Reilly. So I really do like him just from we don't actually have like Rocket Richard odds or anything, but this guy I think is going to have a real good shot at being like a Pasternak type player on that power play with Krug there. So just a lot to like, I think, from him. Anyway, the last team here we have to talk about is the Vegas Golden Knights. Frankly, this seems pretty similar to the Colorado discussion. 75.5 over under. The divisional odds are plus 175. So you're getting, a little bit of uh, equity there, but to me, this team seems sort of inferior to Colorado in some ways. So bringing in Pietrangelo is good, but in order to do so, they had to ship out Nate Schmidt. They had to send away Paul Stastny. So I think a bet on Vegas is a bet on their young centers sort of stepping up and being able to produce at a first line level for them. So, DJ, what are your thoughts on Vegas here?
No, yeah, I'm very high on them. As I do actually think they could just edge out Colorado, as I'll get to. It's going to be very close. I love their defense, though. They have two top pairing defensemen in Theodore and Pietrangelo. I think McNabb is not the best, but him and Pietrangelo should be fine together. Alex Martinez, another addition that may have gotten overlooked in the past. He's a good number 4 there. But I think you have depth like Glass and Tuck on your third line who can definitely score and make things happen. That is unbelievable. The Marchessault, Carlson Smith line is awesome. One of the, obviously underrated lines when they got started and they took flight and kind of carried Vegas to a cup. And then, after that, they pick up Stone and Pacioretty, who are just absolute animals. I love Mark Stone. I think anyone that's watched him play loves Mark Stone. So I guess the best part is Pacioretty and Stone can lift a guy like Chandler Stevenson to, I guess, consideration in daily fantasy sports and really anything. So it is amazing what they've been able to do in just a few years since their inaugural season. Leonard, solid goaltender. Buffalo definitely almost destroyed the man, but he made it out alive. And here we are with a team that I think is super strong and them in Colorado fighting for the top. I just give them the edge. I think they just find a way to get a couple more points, one more win late in the year. They beat it up on the bad teams, maybe just a little bit better. And I think they're a little bit more adverse to a major injury than a Colorado might be. I think they have a lot of depth. So it's kind of a random thought but I think that they have a lot of, they could be adverse over Colorado.
Yeah. So, I think I stick with my lean of Colorado over Vegas, but I certainly get your point. So when we talk about the 4 teams that are make it out of this division and into the playoffs, I think we can both pencil in Vegas and Colorado.
Yep.
Look,
orders, but yes.
Yeah, look, for me, I think it's going to be St. Louis. I don't love St. Louis. So I think a team, though, I mentioned them at the start, like Anaheim. It's tough to bet on a team like that, but in such a short season with a goalie like John Gibson, and just some of the offensive pieces that I think had a unusually quiet year last year. I think this year they'll bounce back. And also one thing to keep in mind when you're sort of betting on these season-long things is that we've already seen it in the NBA. When you go live, it's really tough in a non-bubble setting to sort of keep everything as expected. We're seeing teams fall apart for weeks at a time just due to contact tracing and positive tests and everything else. So I think this season more than most, if you have a hot take, given to sort of the variance that will go into the season, this might be the season to capitalize on it. So I think that Anaheim's that team for me this year. So I'll take them as my 4th playoff team.
Okay. Yeah. So I have Vegas, Colorado. I have the Minnesota Wild at 3. I'm really, really high on them. I mean, the thing that plagued them was scoring. They couldn't find it. They pick up a couple guys in Kaprizov and others that I think will get it done for them. Find the goals, pick up that power play, get them at the 3, and then the Ducks at 4 for exactly what you said. And I think Gibson is a guy that, we're going to get to the awards right now, but if you follow that narrative, Gibson Vezina is something to heavily consider. He is, I think, the best goalie in the NHL, potentially, with him, Hellebuck, and others. So let's get to those awards right now, unless if there's one more thing you wanted to mention about any of the Western Conference.
No, I mean, the division. So obviously we haven't talked about the Canadian or the Central divisions, and stay tuned to the podcast feed for some discussion on those teams. But just in terms of your favorite to win the cup and then a long shot, did you have anyone in mind in terms of just
the entire league, right?
It could be one of the teams we talked about, and it could not be. Yeah, I think I'll lead mine off with I'm big on Toronto this year. I think that Toronto is going to just blitz this Canadian division, and I think that win a cup for Joe, like that whole thing. I'm just really excited by their prospects, and it's great that I can sort of root for their success without them directly impacting the Buffalo Sabres. So that's a first. But and it would just be freaking hysterical if the Leafs won a cup while Canada was under national quarantine. Like that would just make my life. Get Joe his cup, make the Leafs fans sad still, like just perfect. So give that to me every day.
Yeah, I mean, a team that we talked about. I think the Flyers. I'm super duper high on them. I think Carter Hart is the real deal, and he might step up and make his sort of case for why he is one of the elite top 5 goalies in the league. And if he does that, they have the defense, have the scoring. Nolan Patrick, I really, really hope come back, have the redemption story that I think he deserves. A lot of people have kind of written him off. I think people around the Flyers organization are so high on him. He comes back in and adds to that already elite forward group. They could be a real force. They make it out of the East. They have to play what would be the Central. Tampa Bay without Kucherov. Tampa Bay potentially without another guy. I don't know if they're going to be there. Carolina, really the goaltending, I think, to get it done. So they could really walk into that playoffs and play a team like Toronto, which would be just an amazingly fun Stanley Cup with Toronto and Philadelphia. How crazy could it be? So I have them as my kind of favorite to make it. They're maybe one of the highest odds, as we mentioned, but they're up there. And I think long shot wise, first off, I'll give my negative equity long shot. My long shot to miss would be the Dallas Stars. I won't get too into it because we're not covering them. As Matt mentioned, it'll be on the next podcast you probably see on your feed. They'd be my long shot to, I think they're pretty high favorites to make the playoffs. I think they'll be one that misses. My long shot to make it, though, and I think maybe even go on a run, would be, I'm going to go with, I could stick with Minnesota, honestly. I think I'll just stick with them. I already touted them pretty high. I don't think they have a real great chance at the Cup, unless if one of these goalies goes crazy. But I think they're kind of a long shot to make it and maybe make it out of the first round of the playoffs and get into that Final Four.
Yeah, so you've got 50-1 there on Minnesota. I'll take Florida at 45-1. They lost Hoffman, they lost Dadonov, but frankly, they still have Barkov, they still have Huberdeau. I think that Frank Vatrano, if he's sort of the if he's the shooter/scorer that Mike Hoffman was for them on the power play, I think that could be a lot of fun. Also, really underrated is Patrick Hornqvist acquisition. I think he's a really effective power play guy too. So I don't think they'll have too much of a problem scoring goals, despite losing 2 really good top 6 players. And I think you just have the bet on Bobrovsky bouncing back. And so I just think that leaves a lot of upside there to a 45-1 number. So I like Florida there, and especially for the reasons you mentioned about the Central sort of having these question marks and injury concerns. Yeah. So that's where I'll go with that. So anyway, to cap off this show, thank you all for tuning in to our first episode.
Are we going to do the awards?
Yeah. So to cap it off, we're going to just talk about a same thing, favorite and a long shot for some of the 4 major awards, let's call them, between the Hart Trophy, the MVP, the Calder Trophy for the best rookie, the Norris for the best defenseman, and the Vezina for the best goaltender. So, DJ, let's start with the Hart Trophy. We've mentioned a lot of names, kind of talking about these teams, like, players that could, go on a run and, lead their team to the playoffs and sort of earn themselves some consideration. So with all that in mind, do you sort of have like a favorite and then a long shot for the MVP this year?
Yeah, I think Austin Matthews would be my favorite. I think, as you mentioned, Toronto, really the premium team in that division, playing against Ottawa a handful of times. There's a lot of teams in this division, too, I think, that are going to give up a lot of goals. I mean, Winnipeg, kind of defensive team, but I'm not too high on Edmonton's defense, Calgary, Ottawa, obviously, as I mentioned, or Vancouver. So they're going to get a lot of chances, I think, to really have some huge games. I know we talked about it in our podcast. If you can tune into one division only, the North might be the most exciting to watch. And I think Matthews could really be a beneficiary of all of that fun and high-scoring affairs that should ensue. So he'd be my favorite. As far as long shot, I think there's 2 guys that I like. I think one would be Patrick Kane. If you have some belief in this Chicago team to find a way in, which is incredibly optimistic of you, because they're not going to make it almost. I mean, it'd be crazy if they did. But if they find a way to get there, you got to have Patrick Kane as your MVP. I mean, it would be carrying them on his back and scoring 8 million points. Other than that, way down the list, looking on this, I would consider. Oh God, what was it? The guy? Barkov. Barkov was the other guy. Down the list, a very good bit.
Yeah.
Plus 550 on DraftKings, 5,500.
5,500.
He could, he is a special talent on a Florida team that, again, not many people are high on. You're higher on them than most, though. Those would be the guys for me.
All right, so for me, it's pretty basic. My favorite, Nate McKinnon. He got absolutely robbed last year. Leon Draisaitl was not the MVP of the NHL, and you will never be able to convince me of that. So Nate McKinnon, a Get Right award this year. Like, they're just like the narrative's there. They're going to have to give it to him. He's going to have another spectacular season. And also in some of the arguments you made about Austin Matthews, I think apply to Nate McKinnon as well, just in that like they should be the class of their division and not have too much competition. So that's what I like there. And then in terms of the MVP at a more a long shot, I think that Patrice Bergeron at 50-1 is interesting because a lot of the problems there in the past have been like, how do you just pick one of them? And this year, if Boston's really good, if that line comes back together and has a full, let's call it 2/3 or half of the season, the counting stats should be there for Bergeron. And you don't have to deal with David Pasternak's the reason or Brad Marchand's the reason because those guys missed some time. I just think that that's like sort of not quite baked into this where you're getting Bergeron at such a high number relative to a Pasternak at 27-1 or whatever, just with the games played argument. So that's that's sort of who I like for the MVP. Let's go over to the Calder Trophy. Best rookie.
You want to go first this time?
Yeah, so this is a lot of projecting usage more than it is projecting talent.
Oh yeah,
honestly, because it's just really tough. You could have all the talent in the world, but be playing fourth line minutes and just not get there in your rookie season. So, for me, argue amongst yourselves whether this is even appropriate for a guy like Kirill Kaprizov to be featured in this conversation because he is a good amount older than most of these guys contending. But I think Kaprizov at plus 400 is the best bet here. He's going to be in the top 6. He's already produced against men. I just think he should be the odds-on favorite, and he's not. So that's why I like here. Who do you like at the top?
I mean, I definitely agree with that, but I'll just give it to Shesterkin then because he should be the number 1 in New York. I love Lafreniere as well. I mean, there's definitely a case to be made with him. He should be featured, but will he be featured on that top power play? I kind of find it hard to believe. So I think Shesterkin, even if they miss playoffs, he could win it. I mean, he is going to be awesome for them. I'm very, very high on his future. The Rangers, the goalie, they go from Lundqvist to Shesterkin. That's just amazing luck. So I'm very high on him. And Kaprizov, I think the long shot, it's really hard to convince me of a lot of these guys because most of them won't start the season with their team. We even got news today that Marco Rossi is out indefinitely. So a guy that maybe could have slipped in later on. But I think if you're going long shot, I like Sorokin, another goalie for the Islander. If he could somehow either take over, even though he's, if he could take over or there's an injury, his odds, plus 117. Maybe it's not quite enough of equity to get you there, but I think he's also a pretty special talent, an older guy who has excelled at the top pro level. If Varlamov struggles or gets injured or something, he could definitely be another guy right there if they can make the playoffs that he would carry them.
Yeah. So,
is there any long shot for you?
Yeah. So the long shot for me, I wish we had more clarity in the situation on the island because I really like both Kiefer Bellows and Oliver Wahlstrom. Both of those guys are incredible shooters and really gifted offensively. It's just a matter of playing time for both of them. And so it seems like there might be a job open for one of those guys, probably not both though. So if over the next few days we sort of get like hey, this guy is going to be, like this guy seems like he has the edge, I think getting both of those guys at 50-1 could be, a decent long shot bet. So just something to keep an eye on as we sort of close in on the start of the season. But all right, next up we have the Norris Trophy. DJ, I believe you referred to it as the Career Achievement Award.
Yeah, the Career Achievement and Defense Award, for sure. It's definitely. I mean, if you go back and kind of look through it's every time a guy gets snubbed, he wins it the next year. It almost feels like. I don't think it's going to be one of these younger guys just because they haven't played enough and they haven't, met enough of these writers who vote for them and haven't made enough connections to them. So, I mean, these are all humans that are voting on this, and the humans kind of like to pick the guys who are nice to them. They haven't had enough time to do that yet. So I'm definitely looking at the older guys when it comes to this. The only one I'm considering at the top is a guy like Hamilton over a guy like Hedman. Because Hamilton, I think his points are going to be there. It's also, the points matter so much more than the actual defensive play. They don't really care about how good of defense you play. You could be one of the worst possession drivers in the NHL or possession players as far as when you're on the ice, but you get the points, you're there, and that's where Hamilton could make it. So at the top, I don't need to give it to Yossi again or Carlson again. Hamilton at the top, I think, is a fair bet. And as far as the sleeper, I'm definitely not going to take your guy, but I'll take a guy like Shea Weber. Real shot down the list, but if he has the points, which in this high-flying, fun North, a lot of points to be given. Petrie does steal some value from him. Obviously, he's another point producer himself. But if Shea Weber just finds the back of the net up, gets the puck luck hit that, could happen for a defenseman that with his caliber of a shot, he could definitely find himself in that race. And has he ever won? I believe has he won? I'm thinking about it. Shea Weber ever won the Norris?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so either. I don't think so, but I don't know off the top of my head. I'll definitely look that up.
So,
if he's never won one, that's great equity. Way down the list.
Speaking of a guy who's never won a Norris, though, I think that the stars are in alignment for Chris Letang here. 17-1. I don't get why he's not, closer to the favorites, because his problem for the last few years has been injuries. One, obviously those are pretty unpredictable, and they obviously suck when they happen. But in a shorter season, I think he does have some potential to play all 56 games and put up a ton of numbers. And also losing Justin Schultz kind of takes away a guy who stole a lot of power play time from them in the past. So to me, it just feels like everything's there for Chris Letang to sort of, be feeding Gino, be feeding Sid, pick up a bunch of assists, be on a team that maybe is a bit better than expected, and, lock up the, as you said, Career Achievement Award for a guy who's been among the sort of elite tier of defensemen for most of his career, but has never actually gotten the award himself. So that's why I like at the top. Yeah. And then toward the bottom, I think you're sort of betting on a younger guy, maybe a Ryan Pulock, 60-1. He's going to man their first power play. Just really, really good defenseman. One heck of a shot. So I think if you like Shea Weber, you should probably like Pulock too, because they're probably similar bets and you're getting a much better number on Pulock there. So let's wrap this up with the best goalie. I believe we call this the Voodoo Award because goaltending is voodoo, and a good goalie today is trash tomorrow. Anyway, there's a decent look at you mentioned Sorokin and Shesterkin already, and honestly, I think there's a chance that both of those guys as long shots could sort of earn their way into the Vezina conversation as well, just because a lot of the talk around them will be sort of covering for, especially the Rangers, will be covering for a lackluster defense against these, bombshells of teams, guys like Ovi and Boston. There's going to be a ton of offensive firepower against them. I think there is a good amount of narrative toward betting those guys, if you like them for the Calder, to also sort of consider them for the Vezina too. What are your thoughts on that in general?
No, I think generally speaking with the Vezina as well, it's kind of not always, but most of the time it's a goalie that lifts his team from where people thought they'd be to where they end up being, which is kind of why it's hard for me to pick up Vasilevsky or Tuukka Rask or something like that. So, I mean, I've touted Philly enough. If I say they're going to win the cup, I feel like I got to say Carter Hart up here. If he gets the job done, gets them that division win, gets them. Yeah, well, there's the Vezina's voted on before the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Just making sure. Is that one that's just a season? I think that would be enough to get him. That'd be the top guy, just plus 1,000. I think down the list, if Minnesota makes it, as I mentioned, I guess I got to go Cam Talbot. Another guy, definitely hasn't gotten it before. He hasn't shown flashes in the past of being a number one goalie, but if he plays really well with that defense in front of him, which is conceivably could happen. I mean, he has maybe a top 5 defensive unit in front of him, Minnesota, and they find the scoring and he hits the wins. Why not? Plus 2,100 on DraftKings if you're looking there, or if you want to go through the site we probably should be mentioning more, FTN, to find more on that. Definitely, I think he's kind of the bottom of the lowest or worst odds, potential highest exposure as far as starting and playing games on the entire thing. Maybe
would you say
for Omar
the best long shot? He's the best long shot.
That would be another way of putting it.
Right. So
he might be the best long shot if you will.
Yeah. So all right, that's a ton of discussion about what should be a really fun, really unique 2021 NHL season. So thank you all again for tuning in, and we're looking forward to do tons of more shows like this. So just again, if you're just finding this, we're the Fantasy Hockey Picks and Bets show. Find us on your podcast app of choice or on YouTube. It should be great. Also subscribe to the Mayo Media Network in general. They just do awesome stuff. If you like golf or anything else, football, MMA, like there's a ton of stuff there, honestly. So just really, really good stuff all around. And tell us your favorite bets in the comments. If you like,
yes.
If you liked anything that we mentioned or have one of your own, you could also tweet at us. I am at Fake Moods down there. DJ is at DJ_Mitchell94. And then also, again, big thanks to Fade the Noise for helping us, get this show on the road. So, DJ, anything else you want to say?
Fade the Noise, FTN Daily, FTN Bets. Use the code MAYO for a discount. Get in on the optimizers, projections, everything that you want for your season long, your daily, all of that good stuff. Even, you want to take some odds, parlays, all that stuff. It's everything you could need in one spot. Check it out. Give it a look. Subscribe, comment. It takes 2 seconds to subscribe. It means the world to us. It means the world as we get started here. So definitely let us know. Comment what you liked about the show, what you didn't like about the show. Follow us, and let's have a great season. Matt, want to take us out?
Yeah. You'll find us on Tuesdays and Thursdays here. Also find us on the Morning Skate podcast. Just, check that out too, because we'll be talking there mostly about daily fantasy specific things. And, it's a great time. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk soon.
And I guess the one more thing, wait.
Hi. DJ.
Yeah, I was going to mention Tracking Buffalo, but never mind.
Oh. Wait.
It's okay.
I already said we'll talk soon, so I think we're done.
No, we're done. Yeah, no, it's okay. I can. We'll have.
All right. Sorry about that. Shit. I forgot what I said. All right. All right, and that should do it for us here. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk soon. Bye.